What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another, I should say, entertaining episode of OC and TJ. It's Colin O'Callahan, OC, the man. I am back for another week. My team is trash. We've lost 3 in a row, but I'm still here. Got a smile on my face, right? Gotta feel somewhat excited about this. This was a very ugly week of football. I mean, teams barely finding ways to win. We had another very ugly game in MetLife Stadium, which I'm going to talk about in just a bit. There was a blowout on Sunday night. We had a doubleheader on Monday night. That one game went well. The other, it just looked like there was no end to it, and not in a good way. But week 5 is upon us. It's kind of crazy that we're already there. So with that being said, let's get right into this. Starting with Thursday Night Football. Tomorrow night, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking the Atlanta Falcons on the road. So both of them are coming off of wins, but Tampa is still leading the NFC South. I'll start with them since they're the ones that are 3-1. I would say that this was definitely the bounce-back victory that they needed. I mean, last week against the Broncos, they got punked. They were outclassed. They were outcoached. I mean, Baker Mayfield got sacked 7 times. The defense could not get any pressure on Bo Nix whatsoever. But against the Philadelphia Eagles, they took out all their anger and took it out on them. So Baker Mayfield was phenomenal. He had 3 touchdowns, over 350 yards. Mike Evans finally got more involved in the game plan. He had close to 100 yards. Chris Godwin and Kate Otten were effective. Even Sterling Shepard actually made a couple big plays to try to keep this team alive. So I think that the Bucs offense was fantastic. It was 24-0 before you knew it. They scored on, I think, 3 straight drives. And honestly, the score could have been a lot worse if it weren't for some horrible drops. And then defensively, I mean, they did what they were expected to do because Philly was without A.J. Brown. They didn't have Davante Smith. And they pretty much knew that all they had to do was keep Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert in check, and they would do just enough to win. And Lane Johnson was also out on the offensive line, so you got a backup plan on that side. And Tampa Bay completely took advantage of it. I mean, Jalen Hurts got sacked 6 times. He only threw for 158 yards. I think before the only touchdown of the second, or the only touchdown of the first half, he only had like 1 completion for about 7 yards. It was brutal from the start. Saquon, he only had 1 big run, which is why he finished with 84 yards. But outside of that, he did not have any room to work with. Goddard did okay, but he could only do so much. The best wide receiver was Paris Campbell. Like, that should just tell you the lack of depth that they have without their 2 best players. And, like I said, I mean, the offensive line just got completely overwhelmed. They still can't handle the blitz. And without Lane Johnson, it just looked even worse. And I'll get more into Philly's perspective in just a bit. But for now, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. So they're coming off a 26-24 win against the Saints at home. I thought last week it was in New Orleans. So my apologies for that. I got that completely mixed up. I completely forgot that the Saints changed their Superdome name from Mercedes to Caesars. So that's why I got it mixed up. Bad mistake on my part. But still, nonetheless, the Falcons went toe-to-toe with New Orleans, and it took a 58-yard field goal from Younghoe Koo to seal the deal. But I got to be honest, the Falcons were very, very fortunate to win this game. Their offense didn't score a touchdown. Kirk Cousins only threw for 238 yards, and Bijan only ran for 28. Yeah, they had some decent performances from Mooney and London, but, I mean, the Falcons offense, it took 4 field goals and 2 touchdowns off of turnovers for them to win by 2. There was a muff punt that rolled into the end zone on the opening drive, and then in the middle of the second quarter, Derek Carr threw a pick-6 to Troy Anderson. Those were their only 2 touchdowns. So I get that Atlanta did enough in the end, and they benefited off of a blatant pass interference by Paulson Adebo on the final drive that set Younghoe Koo up for the 4th and final attempt. And honestly, he should have won Special Teams Player of the Week because he was phenomenal. But at the same time, it was a very ugly victory on their part. Outside of 1 drive against the Philadelphia Eagles that ended up winning them the game, this Falcons offense has not lived up to expectations. And I get that Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles, but at the same time, I mean, they have their moments. They show what they can be in spurts. And then at other times, they just stall out. I mean, you saw week 1, how miserable they were in the second half. Before that final drive against the Eagles, they didn't really do much to win the game, and they took advantage of a prevent defense against who they play in week 3. Week 3 against the Chiefs, they stall out in the second half and can't convert on 4th down. And then on Sunday, again, they were moving the ball decently, but again, took those 2 turnovers and field goals for them to get the job done. So heading into this game against Tampa Bay, they are going to need to show up big time. And Tampa's definitely banged up because they don't have Antoine Winfield. They don't have Elijah Cansey. They still don't have Luke Gedeke as one of their starting tackles. And, they're going to be down 2 wide receivers. And Atlanta is a tougher team at full strength than Philadelphia is without Davante, without A.J. Brown, and without Lane Johnson. So this is going to be a really interesting grudge match here. It's going to be really close. Given the fact that it's Atlanta, I think the Falcons have somewhat of an advantage here. It's taking me a bit to figure this one out. But, I'm going to go with Atlanta here. I know this is probably not what I should be saying, but, I mean, listen, division rivalry games on the road are always super tough. And, the Bucs, they're coming off a great week, but I feel like now that they're going up against the Falcons on the road, against a team that's trying to keep up with them in the NFC South race, I just feel like the Falcons, they're going to be energized from the jump. We know what their defense is capable of. It has certainly been the furthest issue from this team because it's been playing extremely well all season long. So I could be wrong. It can really go either way, but I think the Falcons take this one. I think they went on a walk-off field goal once again, 23-20. They're not the type of team that's going to win by, 20 or 30 points, but when it really is time against certain teams, then they'll find ways to get the job done. So now we get on to Sunday morning's festivities in London between the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings. One team's undefeated, the other is 2-2. And it's a pretty ugly 2-2. I'll start with the Vikings here because they are the ones that are undefeated. They were up 28-0 in the middle of the second quarter against the Green Bay Packers, pretty much picking up where they left off last week. Their offense was dynamite. Their defense kept forcing Green Bay to make mistakes, and I felt like it was going to be a complete blowout. Like, even after that muff punt towards the end of the first half that led to Green Bay scoring the touchdown on the ensuing possession and then, taking a 28-7 lead before halftime, the Vikings, they were still up by that many points heading into the fourth quarter. And then right when that period began, the Packers, out of nowhere, come back to life. They go boom, 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 touchdown. Next drive, Keyshawn Nixon gets free on a strip sack, knocks the ball out from Sam Darnold. The Packers recover, leads to Tucker Kraft getting wide open for the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. And now Green Bay is somehow only down by 6 points with about 10 minutes to go after they were down by 21 at the start of the quarter. So that was just flat out ridiculous. But the Vikings offense, they didn't choke on the next drive. They moved down the field. Justin Jefferson got wide open on a couple plays. And then, eventually Will Reichard made the field goal to increase their lead to 9. But Jordan Love finds Ontavian Wicks wide open down the right side for 36 yards. They're back in a scoring range. They can at least make it a one-possession contest. And then, just like that, the next play, he heaves a pass off his back foot towards the end zone, and it's an arm punt interception to Byron Murphy. And then when they get the ball back, Tucker Kraft fumbles it away. And, I mean, I get that the Packers scored a touchdown later on, but by that point, it was too little too late. They missed 2 field goals earlier in the first half. Jordan Love threw 2 picks as well. And even with that furious comeback, that late pick and that fumble recovery, that's what cost you the game. Turnovers were the biggest difference. And granted, Minnesota didn't make it any better by letting this team hang around. But you know what? They were more efficient on offense. Sam Darnold, he made a couple mistakes, but at the same time, he still threw for 3 touchdowns. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's leading the league in touchdown passes and passer rating. And heading against his former team, he is ready to make a statement. It might not be the first time that he's going up against the Jets, but it sure as hell is going to be the more important one. And honestly, New York is going to be incredibly desperate for a win because their offense played like trash against the Denver Broncos. And Aaron Rodgers was terrible. He got sacked 5 times, only threw for 225 yards. I should have known that the minute that Garrett Wilson fumbled the ball in the opening drive that it was going to be an ugly game. But Bo Nix threw for -7 yards in the first half. So I thought, okay, the Jets should not let this one fall out of their hands. And if they do, that is flat out pathetic. And sure enough, that is exactly what they did. Bo Nix, let this sink in. Bo Nix only completed less than 50% of his passes for 60 yards. That's 2.4 yards a throw. They were 3 for 14 on third down. They picked up 12 first downs. They only had one receiver that had more than 10 yards, and they still won this game by 1. And Robert Saleh's defense does not get a pass because they still can't stop the run. Javonte Williams had 72 yards. Jaleel McLaughlin had 46. That's like close to 140 yards. So I get that there. But they were still doing more than enough to win this game. I get it. They gave up a wide open touchdown to Cortland Sutton. All right? They were the ones that ended up getting in the end zone. But if you're Aaron freaking Rodgers and you're the one that's in control of this offense, I get that you're coming off a torn Achilles. But the results that you put on display against the freaking Broncos was a flat-out atrocity. 4 for 17 on third down. 16 first downs. Horribly 0 for 2 in the red zone. They were so horribly prepared and undisciplined. They took 13 penalties for 90 yards, but they still had 2 chances to actually close the deal and win the game. After the 2-minute warning, they have the ball 5 yards short of midfield, but instead of trying to get a ground game going, they just decided to keep passing the ball and give Denver more time to put the game away. And it would just kept being incomplete. And then 4th and 10, P.J. Locke comes unblocked off the blitz, sacks Aaron Rodgers, turnover on downs, and the Broncos missed the field goal that could have increased their lead to 4. So Aaron Rodgers had one more shot. This was the chance for him to pull out another ugly victory, but it was going to be a vintage Aaron Rodgers 2-minute drill. And sure enough, he did enough to get the team in a field goal range. But they kept toying around with the clock. They kept trying to throw the ball. He wasn't completing it to his targets. Garrett Wilson and Rodgers were not on the same page. Mike Williams was the only guy who had somewhat of a decent outing. He had 67 yards. Alan Lazard didn't do that bad either. But at the same time, if you keep throwing incompletions and you're giving Denver more time to at least try to string something together in the final seconds, then clearly you're playing way in over your heads. And it was pretty fitting that Greg Zuerlein missed the 50-yard field goal to pretty much end the game with a 1-point loss because the Jets did not deserve to win that game. Like I said, the offense was flat out horrid. They were undisciplined. They were unprepared. Bo Nix was trash, yet he still did enough in that span to try to get this team out in front. And the Jets are just so frustrating this year. One team, they look like playoff contenders, or 1 week they look like playoff contenders, and the next, they look like they shouldn't even belong there. So, I mean, we could throw a lot of people under the bus, but Aaron Rodgers, this loss fell on him. He's the biggest reason why they lost this game, because if you actually got in the end zone and you stopped throwing and if you just stopped trying to throw incompletions in the final stretch, you would have actually maybe even had to have a chance. And I get it. Breece Hall didn't have a great game. Got held to 4 yards and 10 carries. And the Broncos have a surprisingly great defense. But at the same time, this is your offense. Nathaniel Hackett is there because of you. And for you to go into a winnable situation against the Denver Broncos and completely wet the bed when it mattered most, that was flat out disgraceful. And Robert Saleh deserves deserves a lot of culpability as well, because he's the head coach. You're either coaching these players to stop committing these penalties or you're condoning it. And when you look at it, 13 for 90 yards, they were just not prepared at all. I don't want to hear anything about the weather or the fact that Bo Nix was trash or the fact that they had no passing game whatsoever. They had multiple chances and they completely pissed it away. Plain and simple. So heading into this game in London, Vikings are going to be favorites, as they should be. But, I think it's going to be a closer game than people think. I think after last week, Aaron Rodgers is going to want this team to play a lot better. We know what this defense is capable of. They always have an elite secondary, and they have plenty of playmakers on the defensive line, but they still can't stop the run. You're going up against Aaron Jones, who has had a promising stretch through the first 4 games of the season. Sam Darnold has been playing extremely well. You got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison that you got to deal with. And, an offensive line that has held its own for the most part. So this is really going to be another huge challenge for New York, just like week 1 against the 49ers. Defensively, they have to make sure that they don't fall into the situation that they were in last week. They were up 28-0, and then all of a sudden they give up 29 points throughout the rest of the game. You get outscored 29-3 in the entire second half, or since the second quarter, I should say. So we're going to find out what both of these teams are made of. Either the Vikings are going to continue their pace of dominance and stay undefeated and quite possibly be the best team in the NFC, or the Jets are going to finally be able to realize, all right, we know what we did wrong. We need the leaders to step up, and as long as we stick together, we at least have a fighting shot. So we'll see what happens here. I've got the Vikings, though. I just think, listen, I know Sam Darnold and Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback matchup, it looks pretty lopsided from the surface. But this Vikings offense has not been great by accident. Sam Darnold has been slinging it. He has been incredibly accurate. He's not turning the ball over like he used to in the past. He's finding his targets open with ease. He's deferring to the run when he needs to, which has completely worked to his benefit. Kevin O'Connell has done a tremendous job of getting these guys in the right mindset, and I don't think anything different is going to happen against the Jets. They at least have structure. They have a winning culture right now, and the Jets, it looks like they're in a freaking circus right now. So give me the Vikings. I will say 30-27. All right. Now we get to an AFC North rivalry between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. This will be interesting because the Bengals are 1-3. The Ravens are 2-2. They're coming off 2 straight wins. The Bengals finally won their first game of the year. I'll start with Buffalo, though. Or not Buffalo. My God. I'll start with the Ravens here because I have to say, I was not expecting them to blow out the Buffalo Bills like they did. I mean, the minute I saw Derrick Henry run for an 87-yard touchdown on the first play from scrimmage, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a long day for Buffalo. And he was flat out phenomenal. I mean, he was 1 yard short of 200 rushing yards on 24 carries. He had 10 more receiving yards, so he did have 200 yards technically. Lamar Jackson, he had 3 total touchdowns, obviously reminding us why he was the MVP last year. And to be quite honest, when you look at these passing numbers, I was really, really shocked how Buffalo's defense had no answers for Derrick Henry. The best receiver of the day for Baltimore was Justice Hill with 78 yards and 6 catches. Mark Andrews didn't have a reception. Nelson Aguilar was the only guy that had more than 1 catch, or more, the only wide receiver, I should say. And really, there was actually a brief moment in time where I thought, okay, the Buffalo Bills might be able to come back, and they might be able to make some noise towards the second half. And then they try to run some stupid trick play. Kyle Van Noy gets to Josh Allen, knocks the ball out from his hands, and then Kyle Hamilton picks it up for the Ravens, and then Derrick Henry increases their lead to 28-10, and I'm just like, nope, there you go. But defensively, I was really impressed with them. I mean, through 3 weeks, they gave up the most passing yards in the NFL, and against Josh Allen, who's undefeated and an early MVP candidate, he only throws for 180 yards with no touchdown passes. And they didn't score a touchdown in the first half. They didn't really run the ball extremely well. And, I mean, again, they didn't have the worst time moving the ball, but they went 3 for 13 on 3rd down. They only managed to get 240 total yards. They managed to get into the red zone twice and only had 12 first downs. Like, there were times where, Josh Allen didn't really push the ball down the field that much. And maybe that was because Baltimore's defense completely took that away. But anytime that the short passes were attempted, the Ravens were right on it. They knew exactly where to go. Give Zach Moore a lot of credit for an outstanding game plan. And I think that this is definitely their most impressive victory by far. Yeah, last week against the Cowboys, whatever. They have a terrible rushing defense and they stink against talented teams. But the Bills are a team that the Ravens needed to beat to get their respect back and to re-legitimize themselves as a top contender in the AFC. So I can't do anything but just give my flowers to them, and they're back to 500. So the division race in the AFC North is far from over, especially with how the Steelers lost on Sunday to the Colts. Cincinnati, they beat the Carolina Panthers, which was expected, but at the same time, I'm still not really sold on them as much as other people were. I'm happy that they were efficient on offense. Jamar Chase had an incredible 63-yard touchdown where he broke 3 tackles to get it. T. Higgins was more involved. The running game was efficient. The defense forced 2 huge stops early on, and then the Panthers, they tried to fake a punt, and Cincinnati read that perfectly. But honestly, this defense is still incredibly flawed. I mean, I get that they picked off Andy Dalton early in the game, but they still let Chuba Hubbard run for 100 yards. Deontay Johnson had a really great game. Xavier Leggett had one of his more promising showings as a rookie. And Andy Dalton still threw for about 220 yards and 2 touchdowns on 25 completions. So it wasn't like Carolina had any trouble scoring or moving the ball down the field. It was just that they had a few huge missed opportunities. And, they run at a shot. They get to the ball on the 1-yard line on the opening drive. They run a shotgun run to Chuba Hubbard that gets completely stuffed. The next drive, Andy Dalton throws that pick, and then the fake punt in the third quarter leads to Cincinnati going up 31-14. So the Panthers put up a great fight. It was just the fact that Cincinnati just had more firepower, and they took advantage of Carolina's mistakes. Nothing else really needs to be said about that one. So heading into the jungle, that is Paycor Stadium, I have the Baltimore Ravens winning this one because over the last couple of years, when the Ravens have been at full strength, they have had Cincinnati's number. Now, I understand that Cincinnati beat the Ravens in the playoffs, but that was without Lamar Jackson. When you look at how the Ravens beat this Bengals team last year, Lamar Jackson had 2 of his best games throwing the football. Joe Burrow got hurt in the second one, so that kind of demoralized them, so I get that. But at the same time, when you look at week 2, when Baltimore beat them 27-24, Joe Burrow was playing keep up. They were playing from behind the whole time. He threw a red zone interception to Geno Stone that really dictated the whole momentum of that game. And the margin for error against this team is really small. So I think the Ravens with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, those are going to be 2 cute big players that Cincinnati's going to have a hard time stopping. Again, their defense has been flat out horrific so far, with the exception of week 1 against the freaking Patriots. Yeah, that was really impressive. But, I mean, I'm sure Joe Burrow is going to play great. The Ravens defense, either last week was just a fluke or they're really starting to build something. We'll see what happens. But I still think when you have Lamar Jackson, when you have Mark Andrews, when you have Derrick Henry, when you have guys that can really gas Cincinnati's run defense and can really make them spread out all over the field, then, I mean, there's only so much that Joe Burrow can do. So I'll say the Ravens win this 34-23. All right. Let's see what game we have next. Oh, boy. All right, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Indianapolis Colts in Jacksonville. I'll explain why I said it like that in just a minute. But let's get to the Indianapolis Colts, who won their first game against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. Unfortunately, they lost Anthony Richardson early in the second quarter after he tried to run a zone read up the middle and ended up getting the ball punched out. He injured his hip. He was ruled out for the rest of the game. And then in the fourth quarter, Jonathan Taylor unfortunately got hurt as well. So you have 2 of your best offensive players that weren't on the field. Or actually, you didn't have your starting quarterback for most of the game. And then towards the final minutes, you didn't have your best player, period. But Joe Flacco took over. He did incredibly well in backup duty. He threw for 168 yards, had 2 touchdown passes. They were up 17-0 early on. And through the first 35 minutes, I thought the Colts were going to win at a blowout. Their defense forced 2 fumbles. They sacked Justin Fields 4 times. And Indianapolis was running away with this one. But then all of a sudden, after Matt Gay missed a 54-yard field goal, the Colts pretty much let the Steelers back into the ball game. Pittsburgh scored on 3 straight drives. And the Colts try to keep up. They had an early touchdown in the fourth quarter. They kicked a field goal on their next drive, but it was still a three-point game with plenty of time left. And after Cameron Hayward sacked Joe Flacco on third down and forced a quick 3-and-out, I'm like, oh boy, the Steelers have a real strong shot of tying this game up. And then, unfortunately, Zach Frazier snaps the ball too early. Justin Fields falls on it, but it's a loss of 12, and they stall out and turn the ball over on down. So, honestly, I think the Steelers could have at least set the game in overtime if it wasn't for that horrible snap. So, the Colts are coming off a pretty close victory, one that they should have won handedly, but they still got the job nonetheless. The Jaguars, on the other hand, they're 0-4, and fittingly so, because they can't get anything done right. First of all, this game should not have even been close, because that Jaguars offense was bad on Sunday. If Steven Sims didn't muff the punt on the opening drive, and if Houston's offensive line wasn't so horribly undisciplined, they would have lost this game easily by double digits, because that muff punt led to Jacksonville's first touchdown of the game. So, in retrospect, the Jaguars offense only had one great drive that ended with the touchdown. Yet they were still somehow up by 3 with plenty of time left in the fourth quarter. I mean, C.J. Stroud was doing whatever he could, but again, too many penalties led to so many drives stalling out. But I'm going to go down to the final stretch with about in the middle of the fourth quarter, right? So Tank Bigsby, he has a huge 58-yard run. That could have been a 62-yard touchdown if he didn't step out of bounds, but Jacksonville still has first and goal at the 4-yard line. They don't get in on 3 straight plays. Then they decide to go for it on 4th and goal at the 1, and they run a quarterback draw up the middle that gets completely stuffed. The Jaguars defense forced Houston a punt on their next 2 drives, but this is what the Jaguars did when they got the ball back. They ran 9 plays and only had 20-plus yards, and they only ran the ball 4 times. Trevor Lawrence attempted 5 passes and just had 1 completion. I mean, the Houston Texans were gifting the Jaguars countless chances to try to win this game, and Trevor Lawrence completely gagged time and time and time again. I don't want to hear that Evan Ingram was hurt and that, they're still trying to gain better chemistry. You gave him $55 million a year, and you're 0-4. He has regressed big time. And Doug Peterson has it feels like he's completely lost his team. Because when it's time for them to close the deal, this is the second time now, or really the third time in 4 weeks, where they were in position to try to win the game. They had all the chances in the world, and they completely blew them with their own self-inflicted mistakes. So once Houston got the ball back before the 2-minute warning, they marched down the field. Nico Collins was fantastic. He caught 12 passes for 151 yards. C.J. Stroud finished the game with 345 yards. They forced Jacksonville to burn all 3 of their timeouts and then capped off the drive with a wide-open touchdown to Dario Ogunbowale with 18 seconds left. Jacksonville could have easily won this game by at least 10 points if they just cashed it in the end zone, or if they just found ways to control the clock and to have a balanced approach, and they just completely whiffed every single time. They deserve to be 0-4, but the good news about this week is they're at home against the Colts. They have not lost a game to this division rival in their building since 2014, and the last 3 times they played Indianapolis at home, it's been a blowout. So, if Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor are not good enough to play, then Jacksonville should feel good about themselves, because there's a real strong shot that they could keep this streak alive and for them to actually have some dignity at some point in the season. So, you know what? I'll pick the Jaguars here. I'm probably going to be wrong because the Colts are a better team. They have more structure. They have better leadership. Even with Joe Flacco taking over as a backup, we've seen him literally come off his couch and lead the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs. So they know how to play more together. They have a better identity offensively. And while the defense has not been their biggest strength, they at least have picked it up over the last couple of weeks and did what they could to try to get this team back on track. But at the same time, it's just history always finds a way to influence my decisions. I don't really think it will be a blowout, but something tells me that this is going to be a pretty ugly game because the Jaguars' offense is just puke. So I'll say the Jaguars win 17-9. And the reason why I say that is because in 3 of the first 4 games, the Jaguars defense did whatever they could. They just completely welted down the stretch because their offense just kept letting them down on so many chances. So that's all I'll say there. I feel like I'm being too repetitive with this one. Let's go to the AFC East rivalry matchup between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. I mean, I'll start with my team here. What else is there to say besides the fact that they got their asses kicked by a vastly superior football team? I was surprised that they only won by 17 because this should have been a lot worse. The only reason why we even scored a touchdown is because the 49ers decided to fumble the ball on the kickoff in the second half, and Austin Hooper got wide open on 4th down. Credit to them, but Jacoby Brissett got sacked 6 times. Roger Stevenson fumbled the ball for the 4th straight game. The wide receivers are not getting involved. Either they're not getting open or the offensive line cannot allow Brissett to see the field. The defense is on the field for way too long. They did what they could, but they kept giving up big shot plays. Jordan Mason had a great day running the football. And against the defending NFC champions, you just knew that the Patriots were going to get overwhelmed. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened. So heading into week 5, we are completely screwed. Ramondre Stevenson could potentially get benched because of the fumbling issue. We just lost David Andrews for the rest of the season because he's getting season-ending shoulder surgery. We are down to our 4th left tackle. We don't have our starting left guard who's on IR. Michael Owen, who's been the only bright spot. Layden Robinson has been a disaster. Keita Wallace hasn't been good. Sidney So is coming back from an ankle injury. And I get that we have returning players like Kendrick Bourne and Sione Takitaki from the PUP list, but, I mean, this team is trash. I mean, the 49ers are just a way better football team. And I'll give the Patriots credit for at least trying to show some fight, especially from the defense. But, I mean, this is kind of what we all expected. We knew they weren't going to be good. We just didn't think that their offense was going to completely be one of the worst in the league. They're dead last in total yards. They're dead last in passing. They're the second worst in scoring. They have the worst pass efficiency blocking offensive line in the league. They're one of the worst in run blocking. And, I mean, the only silver lining I have for this one, it's against the Miami Dolphins without Tua. Because against the Tennessee Titans, they looked flat out lifeless. It was horrible, and I don't really want to place all the blame on Tyler Huntley because he got thrown into the fire. He only threw for 96 yards on 14 completions. They were 2 for 12 on 3rd down. I mean, I'm going to go off on Mike McDaniel here because I wrote in my Power Rankings article and my recap article that if they didn't make any significant changes with their quarterback room and with the entire offense in general, then Mike McDaniel is essentially forfeiting all of the games that they're playing without their starting quarterback. Because without him healthy, this offense is absolutely trash. They can't run the ball at all. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle aren't getting the ball as often. The play calling was flat out horrific. It was nothing but runs up the middle and bubble screens. Anytime they try to take a shot down the field, it was either dropped or overthrown. And Mike McDaniel has just been content with everything. They're not utilizing their best playmakers. They're essentially saying, all right, Tyler Huntley, you're the one that's going to lead us to victory, even though that's clearly not been the case. There's a reason why he hasn't had a starting gig in the last couple years. And Tennessee was playing Mason Rudolph at the start of the second quarter. He only attempted 3 passes in the entire second half, and they still won 31-12. You know, Tyler Huntley turned the ball over once. He took a sack in the end zone for a safety. Again, it was just a flat-out disgrace what happened on Monday Night Football. And the more they stalled out, the more angry their fans got. You could hear the boos. This goes on coaching because you're supposed to put your players in the best position to succeed, and they have not done that at all whatsoever. it was just flat out horrible. So heading into Gillette Stadium, it's going to be a very, very sloppy game. I'm happy that Tom Brady didn't get the call for this one because I just don't think that he would want to watch the atrocity that's going to take place. Both offenses are going to be horrible. Both defenses are going to play hard. And I get the Dolphins have more speed, but again, they just don't have a quarterback. That is the problem. At least Jacoby Brissett won a game this year and did the bare minimum against the Cincinnati Bengals. So, you know what? I feel confident about my football team. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be atrocious. I mean, again, the reports are saying that Stevenson is going to be benched, and they have so many backups on their offensive line that we're probably going to get crushed. But Miami's offense is puke. Their defense just lost Jalen Phillips for the rest of the season, so that is a huge loss. I feel so terrible for him. And then Bradley Chubb is still on IR. Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland are the only reasons why that secondary has showed some fight. And, I mean, the Patriots, they just have a better defense. And, I mean, at least their offense is better than what the Dolphins look without Tua. I mean, that's all I can really say there. So, I'll say the Patriots win 10-7. Let's go. All right. So now we get to Cleveland versus Washington. Who would have thought the Commanders would win 3 straight by week 5 and be atop of the NFC East? But they have been outstanding, mainly on the offense. Jaden Daniels has turned into a superstar. They're coming off a 42-14 blowout victory against the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, he threw an interception that was a high pass, overthrown. Garrett Williams made a great jump to make the catch. But outside of that, he was flat out flawless. He scored on 4 straight drives in the second half. Jaden Daniels with 2 more touchdowns. Let me pull up my notes here. 233 passing yards, 47 on the ground. That's about 280 yards total. Brian Robinson was phenomenal with 101 yards. But the unsung hero was Jeremy McNichols. I have not heard this name in a while. He was on the Titans in 2021. He was their 3rd-string running back who got playing time because Derrick Henry, obviously had a season-ending foot injury, and he looked okay, but he was a huge reason why they had 216 rushing yards. Jaden Daniels did a great job spreading the ball around. Terry McLaurin had a decent showing. Olamide Zaccheaus, he got wide open on a few routes, and they were a near-perfect 9 for 12 on 3rd down. They were 4 for 5 in the red zone. They had 449 total yards of offense. They have been flat-out incredible, and Cliff Kingsbury, to his credit, got his revenge against the team that fired him not that long ago. So if anybody out there is still saying that it's a college-based offense, then they are sadly mistaken because Jaden Daniels is the dude. He is flat out phenomenal. And to be quite honest, I think they're going to win the division this year because when you look at the Eagles and when you look at the Cowboys, they have done nothing to inspire me thus far. And I just don't really see how. The only way I can see Washington lose this division is if they somehow collapse because we all know Cliff Kingsbury has let that happen before in the past. But defensively, they were even more impressive because they held Kyler Murray to just 14 points, only 142 yards. They sacked him 4 times. And even though James Conner had a decent 100-plus yards showing, it was just – I was really shocked that the Cardinals' offense was just so out of sync throughout the entire game. They were horrible on 3rd down. They only got to the red zone twice. After the opening drive, I thought, all right, this is probably going to be a promising back-and-forth shootout. And then Washington's secondary played flat-out phenomenal. So, got to give credit where it's due. Now, when you talk about the Cleveland Browns, this is now the 3rd straight week where they've been in a situation where they had a chance to win the game and to – or really, it's the 2nd week in a row because they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars by mistake. But this is now the 2nd week in a row where their offense was given the ball back multiple times. Really, we've seen the same script. Let me start over. Sorry. Offense starts out extremely well. They scored on their first 2 drives. They take a 10-0 lead in the first quarter. The defense, starts to break a little. They give up 20 unanswered. And from that point on, the Cleveland Browns offense got nothing. Zilch. But then, earlier in the 4th quarter, they get a glimmer of hope. Zamir White fumbles the football, gets scooped and scored for a touchdown by Ronnie McLeod, and with an extra point, it was going to be a 3-point game with a chance to send the game into overtime. But Dustin Hopkins misses the extra point. They need a touchdown to win. And the Raiders were doing everything they could to be like, here you go. We don't want to win. They only had 34 more yards in the fourth quarter. They didn't score a single point. They were giving the Browns offense timeless chances to be like, here, take it. Try to win the game. And the Browns offense just was absolutely horrid once again. Deshaun Watson only threw for, let me look at my notes here. He only threw for 176 yards on 24 completions, but it's not even just Deshaun Watson's fault at this point. The offensive line is a wreck. They are so injured and ineffective. They can't run the ball extremely well. They get one good receiving performance per week, and yet Jerome Ford has a huge 35-yard run after the 2-minute warning to get in the red zone. And the Browns actually have a chance to win the game. But bad snap, incomplete, short of the first down on third, and now it's 4th and 3 at the 8-yard line. And he takes the snap, waits in the pocket, tries to escape to his left, but then takes the game-sealing sack by Charles Snowden. And the Raiders were able to escape this one. This offense is flat-out putrid. And again, it would be too easy to put all of this on Watson, but everything has gone wrong for them at this point. Again, they can't run the ball without Nick Chubb. Their offensive line is a mess. They only have one receiver that shows up per week. Last week it was Amari Cooper. This time it's Jerry Jeudy. Maybe getting David Njoku back will probably make things a little better. But the defense was doing everything they could once again. Minshew only threw for 130 yards. It took 140 on the ground for the Raiders to have any semblance of an offense. And what makes this even more humiliating for Cleveland, the Raiders were without their two best players. Max Crosby didn't play, and Davante Adams literally just asked for a freaking trade and was ruled out with a hamstring injury. So, heading into Washington, I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel for Cleveland. I got the Washington Commanders winning this game. I think it's going to be a blowout. With how perfect that the Commanders' offense has been over the last 3 weeks, they've only had, one drive where they punted in the last 3 games. Two if you want to count the fourth quarter against Tampa Bay. But I will say Washington wins this pretty handedly. I say this final score will be 27 to 6. Because I know that the Browns defense isn't that god-awful. They'll be fine, but eventually they're going to break because it's Jaden Daniels. So, let's see how many games we have left. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Let's speed things up a little bit. We got the Houston Texans versus the Buffalo Bills. We got the Stephon Diggs revenge game in our sights. But this is a potential playoff preview. And one is coming off a great win. The other is coming off a blowout loss. I mean, we pretty much broke both of these teams down in the recap. Buffalo got completely punked against Baltimore. I mean, they could have stopped Derrick Henry. They had no answers for Lamar Jackson. And while the secondary tried, I mean, they still had no answers to shut down the run. And their offense could not get into any type of rhythm. Josh Allen threw for 180 yards. They didn't run the ball. They were 3 for 13 on third down. They only scored 1 touchdown in the entire second half. And, I mean, you were down 21-3 by halftime. And for whatever reason, you had a chance to at least garner some momentum, but you run a freaking trick play, and Kyle Van Noy gets his hand on the ball, and the Ravens pick it up. They score a touchdown on the ensuing drive, and that was when pretty much when I knew that the game was pretty much going to be over. The Texans, I got to be honest, I have not been that impressed with them so far. I get that they're 3-1. They're supposed to be one of the top teams in the AFC, but they have barely escaped all 3 of their wins. I mean, you look at week 1 against Indianapolis. Their offense plays extremely well, but their defense gets completely torched by Anthony Richardson, and they somehow only win by 2. Against the Bears, their offense struggles, and it takes 7 sacks from the defense along with 2 picks to escape that Sunday night game at home. Week 3, they get completely destroyed by Minnesota. And then week 4, they should have won by double digits. If their offensive line was disciplined, and if Steven Sims didn't muff the punt on an opening drive, this game would have been over. But to their credit, their defense buckled down in the second half. They got a huge 4th down stop at the goal line. They forced the Jaguars to punt on their next 2 drives to end the fourth quarter. And then Nico Collins was great. He had 151 yards on 12 catches. CJ Stroud with 345. And when they got the ball back before the 2-minute warning, they did what they needed to do. They moved the ball down the field with ease. They made Jacksonville burn all 3 of their timeouts. They controlled the clock towards the very end. And they capped it off with a wide open touchdown to Dario Ogunbowale with 18 seconds left. So they showed their toughness. They showed their resiliency. They showed their courage. They showed their courage. And, great teams find ways to win. Not more you can say there. But heading into this game at home, I have a tough one because I don't know if this is going to be a trend where the Bills beat up on bad teams and struggle against good ones. But at the same time, you could say the same thing with the Texans. They beat Indianapolis, they beat Jacksonville, they beat Chicago. 3 teams that are okay, but we don't really know if they're going to make a deep playoff run. The Vikings are undefeated. They're the top team in the NFC. So the Texans honestly are going to be under a lot more pressure to defend their home field than Buffalo will be about trying to steal a win on the road. But I think the Bills will win this one. I think, Josh Allen will find a way to bounce back. I think this Texans defense is the type of group that Josh Allen will have great success against. And granted, while he might not have Stephon Diggs, you still got a great plethora of weapons that could give this Houston defense a lot of trouble. You got Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. You got James Cook in the backfield, Khalil Shakir. So you have plenty of guys that can win their routes and stretch the field. But so can Houston. And Buffalo's defense is really injured right now. They don't have Matt Milano. They don't have Teron Johnson. Von Miller just got suspended for 4 games. Terrell Bernard is out. So this is going to be a really back and forth, high-scoring shootout. I am really excited to see what both offenses can do here. Whoever has the ball last is going to win, in my opinion. But I think if you give it to Josh Allen, then you better watch out. So I'll say the Bills win 34-31. I think it's going to be that great of a game. And I could be wrong. It'll probably be a different score. But, I'm just hoping that we get one of these games so far because, I'm sure we've had like 1 or 2 recently in the past that don't come off the top of my head. But, it would be great to at least see a potential playoff preview be as exciting as what I hope it will be. So that's what I'll say there. This one is not going to be so great. We got the Chicago Bears versus the Carolina Panthers in Chicago. Pretty much a rematch of last year, only except the quarterbacks are not Bryce Young and Tyson Bagent. It is Caleb Williams and Andy Dalton. So I'll talk about the Bears since we didn't really get a chance to discuss them. Their offense finally showed up, which is surprising. Caleb Williams didn't throw for a whole lot of yards, but I think he played a lot better than he has in the last 3 weeks. He was efficient. He was patient. He was calm in the pocket. He didn't make too many mistakes. Only had 152 yards, but made some great passes to keep the chains moving. And really, if it wasn't for DeAndre Swift having the game of his life, I don't think this Bears offense would have been as great as it was. He had 93 yards on 16 carries on the ground. He caught 7 passes for 72 yards. You do the math there. That's 165 yards from scrimmage. Keep in mind, Chicago had 264 total yards. So again, if they didn't have DeAndre Swift having that type of game, this might have been another ugly victory. And there are a lot of things that they got to clean up, but there's progress, and they're a lot better. They were a lot better than they've been in the last few weeks, and they're 2-2 as a result. Defensively, it was bend but don't break. Matthew Stafford did whatever he could to sling the ball down the middle of the field. Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington had a few big games, but when they got in a scoring position and when it was time for them to get in the end zone, they settled for field goals. Joshua Carty made 4 of 5. They were 1 for 4 in the red zone. And unfortunately, turnovers cost them big because Montez Sweat had a huge strip sack that led to a Chicago touchdown the very next drive. And then towards the end of the game, Stafford throws a pick to Jaquan Brisker with a chance to at least tie it, depending on the extra point. But I like what I saw from the Bears. The defense has been their biggest strength all season long. Again, they gave up a lot of yards, but they only gave up 1 touchdown in 4 quarters. When the Rams had a chance to tie the game, they couldn't succeed on the 2-point conversion. So that was the biggest difference in the ball game. The Bears got touchdowns. They made big stops on defense. They didn't turn the ball over. The Rams, they settled for 3 and coughed it up at the worst possible moments. So that's all I can really say there. Now we get to the Carolina Panthers. Again, they showed a lot of fight. This was actually one that they could have won, but on the opening drive, they have the ball at the 1 yard line. They go for it on 4th and goal. They run it in shotgun to Chuba Hubbard. It gets stuffed. Next drive, Andy Dalton throws an interception that leads to Chase Brown walking it in for the touchdown. And then in the middle of the third quarter, they fake the punt. And that leads to the Bengals going up 31-14. So they made way too many mistakes to at least try to steal a victory here. Again, they showed a lot of fight. Chuba Hubbard played great. Deontay Johnson and Xavier Leggett, they were outstanding as a duo. Andy Dalton had a couple touchdowns and 25 completions. But, Cincinnati had more firepower and they took advantage of mistakes. That's all it really came down to. So heading into Soldier Field, I think the Bears will win this one. It's been a few years since Andy Dalton has been the starter for Chicago. So there's a good assumption that this could be a pretty ugly game and that the Carolina Panthers could pull off an upset here. But I just don't know how the Panthers defense can hold when they don't have Derek Brown and they just lost Shaq Thompson due to a torn Achilles. That's really what it comes down to for me. And now that the Bears finally have a good quarterback, I just think that they'll do just enough to win. I think it'll be ugly. I think it'll be really close because Andy Dalton has been a significantly better option at quarterback than Bryce Young has. But I think the Bears will find a way to pull through at home. That's really what it will come down to. So I'll say the Bears win. I'll use the same score as last year, 16-13. Let's do it. All right. Now we have the Raiders versus the Broncos in Mile High. The Raiders have won 8 straight games against this division rival. Both are heading into this game 2-2, and both of them are really scrappy. The Broncos defense has been flat out amazing through the first 4 games. Against Seattle and Pittsburgh, they lost and did whatever they could because their quarterback kept turning the ball over. But they have single-handedly, Bo Nix played well in week 3, but you get the point. They have almost single-handedly carried this team to 2 straight victories. They're second in total yards per game. They're second in passing. They're third against the run. They're third in points scored. Well, not third against the run, but they're third in points scored. They're second in sacks. Vance Joseph has done a tremendous job. And keep in mind, they just lost Alex Singleton for the rest of the year with a torn ACL. So when they can do that with bad quarterback play and little to no production from their offense, that is flat out impressive. They sacked Aaron Rodgers 5 times. They forced a fumble on the opening drive. They didn't allow a single touchdown. Gave up just 4 third down conversions on 17 attempts. The Broncos defense did everything they could to win this game. And the fact that Bo Nix threw for negative yards and still barely escaped with it, he should get on his hands and knees and thank the good Lord that his defense bailed him out. Because if Aaron Rodgers turned back the clock to 2014, then this would be an even bigger blowout, without question. So, listen, I get it. The offense ran the ball pretty well. Courtland Sutton had a wide-open touchdown, but again, they were literally doing everything they could to lose that game. Will Lutz missed a 50-yard field goal on the final drive, yet the Jets offense could not do a single damn thing. And you got to give credit where it's due to the Broncos defense. The Raiders, they're just really inconsistent at this point. I'll give them credit for beating the Browns without Davante, without Max Crosby, but one week they look like a promising scrapping team, and then the other, it looks like they are one of the worst teams in football. They come back from a 10-point deficit against the Ravens to steal a win on the road. 2 weeks later, they beat the Browns. They hold a 20-10 lead and nearly blow it. And then in between that, you get mollywopped by the Chargers. And then 2 weeks later at home against the Panthers, you let Andy Dalton torch you for over 300 yards. So I just don't really get this football team right now. Their offense is really sluggish. Their defense, it's done okay for the most part, but it's just, you never know how they're going to be on any given week. 1 week, they look like they're world beaters. The other, they're getting torched left and right. So against the Broncos, anything could really happen here. Davante's still going to be out with a hamstring injury, but at the same time, he also requested a trade. So I don't know if he's out because of that as well. But they're getting Max Crosby back, so their best defensive player will be back. And when you're going up against a rookie quarterback like Bo Nix, who has not done a single damn thing well this year besides one solid half against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then I don't know. I just don't see the Broncos winning this game. I know their defense is going to play outstanding. They're going to do whatever it could, but I have more faith in Gardner Minshew doing what he can with a mediocre offense than Bo Nix, who has been a disaster so far this year. So I'll say the Raiders win 20-10. 20-10, because at least Denver can run the ball pretty decently. And again, I already talked about how the Raiders did against the Browns. They only had 34 yards in the fourth quarter. They fumbled the ball and gave up a touchdown to Ronnie McLeod. This should have been a blowout, but you got to thank the good Lord that the Browns don't have an offense, because, I mean, if they didn't have an anchor contract breathing down their necks, then, I mean, it would just be an uglier game for the Raiders. That's all I'm going to say. So, all right, we're almost done. Let's get to the 49ers versus the Cardinals here. One is coming off a win. The other is now 1-3, and things are not looking good for them so far. For the 49ers, they bounced back. They're 80% of what they were at the start of the year. They got Deebo Samuel back. They got George Kittle. Both and Travarius Ward were healthy. They had Trent Williams. Brock Purdy got quickly taken off the injury report because of the back soreness. And they did what they needed to do. They blew out the Patriots. They shut them down on all three levels. I mean, if it wasn't for a fumble recovery on a special teams play, the Patriots wouldn't have even been able to score a touchdown. And things are heading back in the right direction for them. So as long as they don't suffer any more injuries, they're going to be fine. The Cardinals, on the other hand, their defense got completely torched against one of the best offenses in the league so far, which is crazy to think, 3 weeks ago. Jaden Daniels was near perfect once again. They scored on 4 straight drives in the second half, and Kyler Murray could do absolutely nothing. Only 14 points, just 140 passing yards, or 142, I should say. 4 for 11 on third down, and even with a promising running game by James Conner, Kyler Murray still got sacked 4 times. They couldn't really move the ball extremely well. They only reached the end zone or the red zone twice. And after scoring a touchdown on the opening drive, they got outscored 42-7. So that was flat out shocking. It was just how bad they got blown out and how they couldn't do a damn thing on offense. So I'm still trying to process it. So heading into this game at Santa Clara, I think the 49ers should win handedly. I think the Cardinals will be scrappy and competitive early on. So there will be some rumblings about, okay, are the Cardinals actually back? But I think the 49ers just have way too much firepower and talent. They have a way better team. They're going to be better coached. And, that's just what it really comes down to in this game. So I say the 49ers win 34-16. Now we get to the Packers versus the Rams. I already said what I needed to say about LA. They had multiple chances to win. They didn't have a hard time moving the ball, but when they got within scoring range, they settled for field goals. They turned the ball over twice, and their defense let DeAndre Swift have one of the best games of his life and didn't get that much pressure on Caleb Williams. They had a few boneheaded penalties, so they made too many self-inflicted mistakes to try to win the game. The Packers, same thing. You're down 28-0. You missed 2 field goals. Jordan Love throws 2 early interceptions. It takes a muff punt for you to score your only touchdown of the half. And heading into the fourth quarter, you're down 21 points. And then out of nowhere, the floodgates open. You go boom, 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 touchdown. Keyshawn Nixon has a huge strip sack, which leads to Green Bay scoring another touchdown and the 2-point conversion to make it a 6-point game. But then Minnesota makes the field goal to increase their lead to 9. Jordan Love heaves an arm punt pick to Byron Murphy. And then another drive later, Tucker Kraft fumbles the ball away, and it's too little too late for a comeback. So the Packers just made way too many mistakes to win this game. Early on, they had so many chances, but Jordan Love kept turning it over. They still don't have a kicker. And against the Vikings, who are now undefeated and one of the best teams in the NFC, turnovers can cost you like that. You turn the ball over once, you make one simple mistake, that could dictate the whole momentum. And the defense does not get a pass either because they got torched by Sam Darnold once again. They gave up a few touchdowns. Justin Jefferson had a pretty typical Justin Jefferson performance. Aaron Jones had a great return to Lambeau Field. And, they just they had a couple turnovers themselves, but they never let the game get out of hand. And when they were up 28-0, it just felt like everything was in their control. And even when Green Bay made that furious comeback, they still did what needed to be done to make sure that, they didn't completely choke it away. So heading into SoFi Stadium, it's going to be really interesting. But, if the Rams were healthy, I would probably say that the Rams could pull off the upset here. But I'm going to go with the Packers. I think they have the better quarterback. They got more playmakers on their offense. I get that they're without Christian Watson. But against this Rams defense, I think that this is going to be one of those games where Jordan Love cleans up those mistakes and reminds us why he completely turned it on over the last 8 games of the season last year. And defensively, I think that, again, if Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua were healthy, then I would say that this is probably going to be one of those games where Green Bay struggles. But we've seen them have outstanding performances when nobody expected them to. We saw that against Indianapolis when they picked off Anthony Richardson 3 times. We saw it against Tennessee when they sacked Will Levis 8 times. And against the Rams, this could be a chance for Green Bay to unleash the dogs and to make sure that they play with a different mentality. So I think it'll be pretty close early on, but I think the Packers will find a way to pull it out down the stretch. I'll say that they win this game 30-20. Okay. Now we have 3 more games on our docket. We got the final Sunday afternoon game between the Seattle Seahawks and the New York Giants. I'll start with Seattle here. I think, listen, their first loss was going to happen eventually. And Geno Smith played incredibly well. He had over 430 yards of offense. He scored all the points that needed to be scored. But not only was Jared Goff literally perfect with 100% completion rate, 2 touchdown passes, and a receiving touchdown, but I felt like the Seahawks made too many mistakes to win. DK Metcalf fumbled the ball on the second drive of the game that led to Seattle take a convincing 14-0 lead. That was on a potential game-tying drive, by the way. They had 2 chances near the end of the fourth quarter to make it a 1-score game, and Connor Williams snaps the ball too early, which rushes the play. That forces Geno Smith to overthrow his target and turn the ball over on downs. And then on a desperate final drive, Geno just trucks the ball into triple coverage or into double coverage to Kirby Joseph. And that pretty much sealed the deal. So Seattle's defense got completely torched by Jared Goff. They gave up plenty more yards on the ground. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for Jared Goff having the game of his life, then I don't think the Lions would have been able to win. I said last week that they needed him to really step up, and that is exactly what they did. Hopefully, he actually watched the show because I was really happy for that. So, again, Seattle's offense tried. Kenneth Walker had 3 touchdowns. Geno Smith was incredible, but not only did their defense get torched, their offense couldn't close when it mattered, and they made too many mistakes, and they were all self-inflicted. So that's all I can say there. Now we get to the New York Giants. I wasn't surprised at all that this was close. I knew the Cowboys were not the convincing team that we all thought it would be, just earlier this offseason. I also knew that, they were pretty average throughout the entire season. But, bottom line for the Giants, they couldn't score a touchdown. They couldn't. Daniel Jones was okay. Malik Neighbors was great. But A, they couldn't run the football. B, Daniel Jones either was overthrowing or underthrowing wide open passes. There were a few bad drops. And when it was time for them to take the lead and for them to make a statement, they just kept settling for 5 Greg Joseph field goals. And the funny thing was, the Cowboys offense wasn't even that great in the second half. They only scored 3. They only had 2 field goals. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, I get they had promising numbers, but in the second half, they completely stalled out. They had no running game. The offensive identity is literally CeeDee Lamb or bust, and they were just doing everything they could to give the Giants multiple chances to try to get a touchdown or to try to get the lead. And Daniel Jones just couldn't capitalize on any of the opportunities that he had. And there actually was another moment late in the game where Brandon Aubrey misses a 51-yard field goal. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Giants actually have another shot, but Daniel Jones throws an interception into double coverage, so never mind. But heading into Seattle, I think over the last 2 years, the Giants have been completely mollywopped by this team. Geno Smith didn't post the most convincing numbers in their last 2 matchups against the Giants, but their defense has been flat out phenomenal. I don't think he's going to get sacked 11. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to get sacked 11 times like he did last year, but I think it's going to be one of those games where Seattle's defense bounces back. Their offensive talent really shows, in spurts and makes enough plays to make sure that they stay out in front. And unless Daniel Jones has one of the best games of his life, I just don't see the Giants pulling off this road upset. So I think the Seattle Seahawks will win. Pretty low-scoring game, but I still think they find a way to get ahead by 2 scores. I'll say they win 24-10. So now we get to Sunday Night Football between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. Rivalry renewed. The Steelers are 3-1, coming off their first loss of the season, while the Dallas Cowboys are 2-2 and are barely coming off a victory against the New York Giants. So, I'll start with the let's start with the Steelers because I pretty much already talked about the Cowboys here. Pittsburgh is coming off a pretty gut-wrenching loss to the Indianapolis Colts. They were down 17-0 early on. Through the first 35 minutes, they were getting punked. They lost 2 fumbles. They got sacked 4 times. But then Matt Gay missed a 54-yard field goal, and, it opened the floodgates. The Steelers scored on 3 straight drives. Indianapolis kept up with a touchdown and then a field goal. But then Cam Hayward comes up with a huge sack on 3rd down and forced a 3-and-out. And the Steelers have a chance to at least send the game into overtime or to win the game with a touchdown. And sure enough, when you actually have hope for the Steelers to at least get points on the board, Zach Frazier snaps the ball way too early. Justin Fields falls on to the ball. It takes a loss of 12 yards. They stall out and turn the ball over on downs. If it wasn't for that play, I think that the Steelers would have at least sent the game into overtime. And who knows, maybe they would have BS'd their way to a victory. But, they just made too many mistakes early on. They could have run the ball with Najee Harris well. George Pickens fumbled the ball deep inside the red zone. Justin Fields did the one thing you can't do as a quarterback when you're scrambling, which is spin out of the pocket and somehow lose control of the ball. That's exactly what happened. And while the comeback was impressive, and he still had one of the best games of his life with 300 yards and 3 total touchdowns, the comeback was just too little too late. And that bad snap pretty much sealed it. But if there is a silver lining here, Justin Fields has officially won the starting job for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he's gotten better week after week. Even though they lost this week, the numbers have gotten better. He's minimized the mistakes, well, with the exception of that fumble earlier on in the 3rd quarter or earlier on in the game. You get the point. I just don't know what you can do. I get that Russell Wilson is still dealing with that cap tightness, but you got to go with the hot hand at this point. Justin Fields has helped this team win football games. He hasn't completely wet the bed. And, the offense is starting to get better over time. So we'll see what happens this week against the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, you got Micah Parsons on the other side, but they can't stop the run. They don't do well against legitimate defenses. And to be quite honest, when you got Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense going up against this Steelers defense, who has so many playmakers on all 3 levels, I could see Pittsburgh stealing a victory. Tyler Guyton has struggled very badly on the left side of the line. And guess who he has to go up against? TJ Watt, one of the best defensive players in the league, who is flat out unstoppable. So I think the Steelers will win here. I think it'll be close because we know what Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are capable of. And Micah Parsons is still a game wrecker. But I think this is time for Justin Fields to shine. And with the right coaching and with with little mistakes, I think they could do enough to try to win this game. So I say the Steelers will win 23-20. And I think it'll come down to overtime. That's how convinced I am. Now we get to the Chiefs versus the Saints on Monday Night Football. I'll be honest here. The Chargers have a bye week, so I'm not going to really talk about them. I will say this, though. This should have been a shutout because the Chiefs turned the ball over on 2 straight drives. Carson Steele lost a fumble. Patrick Mahomes threw a high interception, and it led to the only points that LA scored for the game. And then since that, LA's offense only had 111 more yards, and they didn't score a single point for the rest of the game. You know, the Chargers were without their 2 starting tackles. Chris Jones had an outstanding game. He had 2 sacks. And anytime Steve Spagnuolo brought the blitz, the pressure got there on time, and the offense was pretty much one-dimensional. They couldn't really run the ball. And the Chiefs' offense, the more that LA's offense stalled out, the more chances that Patrick Mahomes had at taking the lead. And sure enough, he did what needed to be done. Travis Kelce had a better game, a bounce-back performance after the 3-week slump he had. Kareem Hunt, in his return to Kansas City, had close to 70 rushing yards. Xavier Worthy got behind the defense for a 57-yard touchdown. And then Samaje Perine put on the finishing touches in the fourth quarter. However, it's definitely a Pyrrhic victory because they are going to be without Rashee Rice for the rest of the season. The initial diagnosis was that it was a torn ACL, but apparently Andy Reid is saying that they're getting second opinions. So we'll get an official word on that when it comes out. But the New Orleans Saints, I said this earlier on, but this game was in their hands. They should have won this game because the Falcons didn't score a single touchdown on offense. It took 4 Youngway 2 field goals and 2 touchdowns off of turnovers for them to win. And the Saints actually took the lead with a minute to go, but those 2 turnovers cost them. They muffed a punt on the opening drive that rolled into the end zone for a score. And then in the middle of the second quarter, Derek Carr throws a pick 6 to Troy Anderson. And then even before that go-ahead touchdown to Chris Olave in the fourth quarter, they get the ball inside the 5-yard line. They don't get the points. They don't take the points. Instead of being down by 3, they're still down by 6 because they failed to get the 4th down conversion. So the Saints completely let this game slip out of their hands. Their offense underachieved until it was too late. Their defense did whatever it could for the most part, but Paulson Adebo had that blatant pass interference penalty that set up the final game-winning field goal. And now I'm worried that this team just got too hot too early because through the first 2 weeks, they looked like the hottest offense in the league. And now we're starting to wonder, are we really back to the same situation that we were in last year with this football team? Because they have the pieces that they need on both sides of the ball. Dennis Allen has done a decent job as a head coach. Clint Kubiak seems to have revamped this offense. The defense has not taken a step back, but yet they still keep losing winnable games. Last week it happened against the Eagles, where the offense couldn't do a damn thing until the fourth quarter. And then this time, we see the same thing. They only lose by 2, but their offense didn't really show up for the most part until it was too late because of self-inflicted turnovers. So I want to see the Saints win this game. I can see them keeping it close, but I mean, listen, the Chiefs might be banged up, but they still got the best quarterback in football. They still have the best head coach. We know what their defense is capable of because they have sure as hell not regressed since last year. So it'll be a low-scoring game, but I have a lot more faith in their defense to set up plenty of opportunities for Patrick Mahomes to get in the end zone. So I'll say the Chiefs win 24-10. 24-10. Because we all know that with the exception of 2 games, Derek Carr has not done the best at Arrowhead Stadium. So, all right. Well, that wraps it up for week 5. I'm just looking through to see if I missed any teams because some of them are on a bye. We already talked about Tennessee. They beat the Miami Dolphins 31-12. I think they did what they needed to do against the Dolphins team without Tua Tagovailoa. Mason Rudolph took over for an injured Will Levis. And honestly, that could have been the best thing to happen for Tennessee because Will Levis threw an interception on the opening drive. And when Mason Rudolph took over, he didn't really do that much, but at least they didn't turn the ball over. They exhausted Miami's defense with the run. And again, when you don't have Tua Tagovailoa, this offense goes nowhere. So the Titans relied on 5 field goals from Nick Folk. He had one of his better performances. Tony Pollard wore this Miami Dolphins team out down the stretch. And that sack in the end zone for a safety really wrapped things up. So they finally got their first win of the year, but I'm not really sold on them one bit because, I mean, defense is great, but the offense, it's not looking good because if they had better quarterback play, they'd be in a way better situation right now. So we got those teams out of the way. I already talked about the Chargers. And yeah, I think that is officially it. And then the Lions, we already talked about them. I didn't even get to them. So from their perspective, this was the Lions team that I've been waiting for since the start of the year. I said last week that Jared Goff needed to step up, and he did so and more. I mean, I said he needed to play better, but I did not think that he was going to be literally perfect. 18 of 18 with over 290 yards, 2 touchdown passes, and a touchdown reception. They were playing complementary football extremely well. They were incredibly balanced. I love what I saw from this offense, and if it wasn't for Jared Goff having the game of his life, then I don't think that the Lions would have won, because even though Geno Smith and the Seahawks, they missed out on a few drives, they were still moving the ball extremely well. Kenneth Walker had 3 touchdowns. Geno Smith had over 400 yards. DK Metcalf, with the exception of that fumble, was torching that Lions secondary. So, I mean, the Seahawks were hanging in there, but Jared Goff had the game of his life. And if it wasn't for that stupid sack in the end zone in the final minutes, I don't think that Geno Smith would have been able to throw that interception into double coverage. So, I'll leave it at that. But make sure to like and subscribe for additional content. Week 5 is going to be starting in about 24 hours or under 24 hours. Week 4 has officially concluded. So have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Peace, everyone. Love y'all.